At exactly 2:03 a.m., my 4-year-old daughter tightened her arms around my neck and whispered, "Daddy, why is Mummy sleeping in her car?" My ex-wife, one of New York's most celebrated CEOs, was asleep behind the steering wheel of her luxury SUV. And in that single moment, everything I believed about her perfect life began to collapse. My name is Junior Scott. I'm 42 years old, and if you ask people across Brooklyn who I am, most won't recognize my face. But they probably work, study, or live inside buildings protected by technology my company designed. 14 years ago, I founded Urban Grid Building Intelligence, a company specializing in transforming ordinary buildings into intelligent ones. We install AI-powered building automation systems that help hospitals, office towers, luxury apartment complexes, universities, and commercial properties operate more safely and efficiently. Our technology predicts equipment failures before they happen. It reduces energy waste, improves indoor air quality, controls intelligent security systems, and helps property owners manage entire buildings from a single digital platform. Today, Urban Grid manages thousands of smart systems throughout Brooklyn and Manhattan. Success gave me opportunities I never imagined growing up. But the achievement I value most has never been my company. It's my daughter, Nia Scott. She's 4 years old, curious about everything, fearless enough to ask questions adults are too afraid to ask. And ever since my divorce 2 years earlier, she's been the center of my entire world. People often tell me they don't know how I balance running a fast-growing technology company while raising a little girl alone. The truth is, I stopped trying to balance them. I simply decided that no business meeting would ever become more important than hearing my daughter laugh. That decision changed my life, because I had already made the opposite mistake once before. The woman sleeping inside that SUV was Simone Scott. For 13 years, she wasn't just my wife. She was my greatest teammate. She eventually became the CEO of one of America's fastest-growing healthcare technology companies. Every business magazine praised her. Every leadership conference wanted her on stage. Every interview described her as a woman who had somehow mastered success. The world saw perfection. I saw someone who used to fall asleep on the couch while we dreamed about building a better future together. 2 years earlier, we signed divorce papers. Not because we stopped loving each other, because somewhere along the journey, we stopped making time for the people we loved. Neither of us cheated. Neither of us screamed. Silence slowly replaced conversation until our marriage became another appointment neither of us knew how to keep. Our divorce ended peacefully. Our responsibility as parents never did. That's why seeing Simone asleep inside her own SUV at 2 o'clock in the morning made absolutely no sense. She owned a luxury penthouse overlooking Manhattan. She earned millions every year. She could book the finest hotel in New York without thinking twice. Yet there she was, alone, still wearing her navy blue executive suit, laptop bag beside her, her head resting against the window as though she hadn't slept properly in days. Nia looked at me with innocent eyes. "Daddy, should we wake Mummy?" I took one slow step toward the driver's window. And that's when I noticed something inside the SUV that instantly told me this wasn't just exhaustion. Something was terribly wrong. The moment I stepped away from Simone's SUV that night, I realized something I hadn't admitted in 2 years. I had moved on from our marriage, but I had never stopped caring whether she was safe. I carried Nia back to my SUV without waking Simone. My daughter looked over my shoulder until the black SUV disappeared behind us. "Daddy, is Mummy okay?" I wished I knew the answer. "I don't know yet, sweetheart." That was the truth, and for the first time since our divorce, the truth frightened me. 13 years earlier, our lives looked nothing like they did that rainy Brooklyn night. Simone and I weren't wealthy. We weren't famous. We were simply two ambitious people sharing one impossible dream. I wanted to build technology that made buildings think. She wanted to make healthcare more accessible through innovation. People often assume successful companies begin with millions of dollars. Urban Grid Building Intelligence began inside a rented warehouse in Brooklyn with cracked concrete floors, second-hand desks, and a single whiteboard balanced against the wall. During the day, I met property owners. At night, I installed sensors myself. I programmed software until sunrise. I carried equipment upstairs because I couldn't afford delivery crews. Some nights I slept in the office, not because I enjoyed it, because every dollar mattered. Simone never complained. After finishing 12-hour shifts at a healthcare technology startup, she came directly to the warehouse. She answered customer emails, prepared invoices, packed equipment, even swept the floor before we locked the doors. We celebrated our first contract with cheeseburgers from a neighborhood diner. Looking back, that meal tasted better than every luxury restaurant I've visited since. Those years taught us something money never could. Success grows quietly before the world notices it. 5 years later, Urban Grid transformed its first hospital into a fully intelligent medical facility. The building could predict equipment failures before they interrupted surgeries. Energy consumption dropped dramatically. Indoor air quality improved. Doctors spent less time worrying about infrastructure and more time saving lives. Word spread quickly. Universities called. Commercial developers called. Luxury apartment owners called. Eventually, some of New York City's tallest buildings trusted our technology every single day. At almost the same time, Simone's career exploded. Her ability to solve impossible business problems earned promotion after promotion. She became the youngest executive in her company, then Chief Operating Officer. Finally, Chief Executive Officer. The newspapers loved our story. They called us Brooklyn's power couple. Magazine photographers asked us to smile beside skylines we barely had time to admire. People believed we had figured life out. They couldn't see what happened after the cameras disappeared. Dinner became conference calls. Weekends became business trips. Vacations became investor meetings. Our calendars talked more than we did. Neither of us noticed how dangerous that had become. The distance arrived politely, then quietly, then permanently. One evening, I came home carrying flowers for our anniversary. Simone was still inside a board meeting. She walked through the front door nearly 3 hours later. She looked exhausted. I looked disappointed. Neither feeling was wrong. Neither of us argued. That was the problem. Arguments can be repaired. Silence slowly builds walls. Months became years. Even after Nia was born, we promised things would change. For a little while, they did. We took family walks through Prospect Park, read bedtime stories together, celebrated birthdays without checking our phones. Then another promotion arrived, another expansion, another acquisition, another responsibility. We convinced ourselves we were sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. Tomorrow arrived. Our marriage didn't. The divorce happened inside a quiet courtroom. No accusations. No betrayal. No dramatic speeches. Only two tired people admitting they had become strangers. The judge finalized everything in less than 30 minutes. Outside the courthouse, Simone looked at me with tears she refused to let fall. She spoke only once. "Promise me one thing." I nodded. "No matter what happens between us, Nia never feels divorced. I promise." And I kept that promise every single day. So did Simone, which was exactly why seeing her asleep alone inside that SUV 2 years later felt completely impossible. Because whatever secret she was hiding, she had chosen to carry it alone. And I couldn't stop wondering why. I barely slept after dropping Nia at home that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Simone curled up inside that SUV, instead of the luxury penthouse everyone believed she returned to after another successful day. By 6 that morning, I had already convinced myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe she had worked too late. Maybe she was too exhausted to drive. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Those excuses lasted exactly 3 hours. At 9:30, I attended our executive leadership meeting at Urban Grid's headquarters in downtown Brooklyn. My chief technology officer presented updates on a hospital modernization project in Manhattan. The operations director reviewed 3 new contracts. Our engineering teams had just completed another intelligent building platform for a university campus. Everyone around the conference table was focused. I wasn't. My mind kept returning to one question. Why would Simone choose a car over her own home? After the meeting, I walked into my office overlooking the Brooklyn skyline. My assistant entered moments later. "There's a package for you." I looked up. No return address. She shook her head. It was hand-delivered. The envelope contained only one photograph. Nothing else. The picture showed Simone's black SUV. The same one I had seen overnight. It had been photographed from across the street. Someone had clearly been watching her. On the back of the photograph, one sentence was typed in black ink: "Stay out of her business." I read it 3 times. Then I quietly locked my office door. Whoever sent it knew I had seen Simone, which meant someone had probably seen me too. That wasn't a coincidence. That was surveillance. For the first time, I stopped believing this was simply a personal problem. Someone else was involved. Someone who wanted me to stay away. That evening, after picking up Nia from preschool, I drove past the same street. The SUV was gone. The parking space sat empty beneath the same streetlight. Nothing looked unusual, but everything felt different. For the next 4 nights I kept looking. Sometimes before sunrise, sometimes close to midnight. Nothing. Then, on the 5th night, I found it again. Different neighborhood. Same black SUV. Different street. Same exhausted woman sleeping behind the wheel. This time I didn't walk toward the vehicle immediately. Instead, I watched from a distance. 20 minutes passed. Then something happened. A dark gray sedan drove slowly down the street. It never parked. It simply reduced speed as it passed Simone's SUV. The driver looked toward her vehicle, then continued driving. 5 minutes later, another vehicle repeated the exact same behavior. Neither driver stopped. Neither spoke. Yet both seemed interested in only one thing: making sure Simone was still there. A chill ran through me. This wasn't random. Someone knew exactly where she spent every night. When the street became quiet again, I finally approached. I tapped gently on the driver's window. Simone opened her eyes instantly. Not slowly. Not with confusion. With the reflexes of someone who had been sleeping lightly for a very long time. The moment she recognized me, surprise crossed her face. Then, concern. Not for herself. For me. "Junior, what are you doing here?" I could ask you the same question. She glanced through every mirror before answering. "I can't talk here." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's not safe." Those 4 words carried more fear than I had ever heard from her. Simone had negotiated billion-dollar agreements without trembling. She had testified before government committees. She had spoken confidently before thousands of investors. Yet tonight, her hands were shaking. I looked directly into her eyes. "Are you in danger?" She stayed silent. That silence became my answer. I reached into my jacket pocket and handed her my business card. It wasn't because she needed my number. She already knew it. On the back, I wrote one address: an old urban grid testing facility we no longer used. "No cameras," I said quietly. "No employees. No one knows about it." She stared at the card for several seconds, then folded it carefully into her notebook. "I'll come." She hesitated. "If I know I wasn't followed." Before I could ask another question, headlights appeared at the end of the street. The same gray sedan, moving slowly, watching us. Simone immediately started her engine. "Go home, Junior. Please." Without another word, she drove away. The gray sedan followed less than 10 seconds later. I remained standing alone beneath the streetlight, listening to both vehicles disappear into the Brooklyn night. And that was the exact moment I realized whoever was hunting Simone had just noticed me too. The old urban grid testing facility had been closed for almost 3 years. Most people believed we had sold the building after moving into our new headquarters. We hadn't. I kept it because it contained prototypes, retired servers, and equipment that was still useful for research. More importantly, very few people knew it still belonged to me. I arrived just before 8 that evening. The warehouse sat between 2 aging brick buildings in an industrial section of Brooklyn. No company logo, no security guards, no employees. Exactly as I had promised. I waited. 10 minutes became 20, then 30. Just as I began wondering if Simone had changed her mind, a familiar black SUV slowly rolled into the empty parking lot. She didn't park immediately. She circled the block twice. Stopped. Checked every mirror. Only then did she pull inside. The moment she stepped out, I realized how much weight she had lost. Her expensive suit still fit perfectly, but her confidence didn't. She looked over both shoulders before walking toward me. I made sure nobody followed me. I unlocked the side entrance. Neither of us spoke until the heavy steel door closed behind us. The silence inside the warehouse felt strangely comforting. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't looking over her shoulder. I handed her a bottle of water. She smiled weakly. "Thank you." It was the first genuine smile I had seen from her in years. "I've been asking myself one question since I saw you that night." She nodded. "I know. Why were you sleeping in your car?" Simone lowered her eyes. For several seconds, she said nothing. When she finally spoke, her voice barely carried across the room. "Because I stopped feeling safe in my own home." I frowned. "What happened?" She walked toward one of the workbenches and placed a thick folder on it. "I never told the board. I never told the police. I never told you." She slowly opened the folder. Inside were dozens of photographs, printed emails, copies of contracts, bank transfers, anonymous letters. My heartbeat slowed. This started 8 months ago. She slid the first document toward me. It was a proposal for a nationwide healthcare technology contract worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I refused to approve it. Why? Because the software wasn't ready. She looked directly into my eyes. The company developing it falsified its safety reports. I stared at her. If hospitals installed it, she finished my sentence, patients could die. The room became completely silent. The board wanted the profits. The investors wanted the announcement. They kept telling me the remaining issues could be fixed later. But you refused. I refused. She nodded. So they found other ways to pressure me. She pushed another stack of documents toward me. Anonymous emails, threatening messages, photographs of her apartment, pictures of her entering restaurants, leaving board meetings, picking up coffee. Every movement had been documented. They wanted me to understand something. They were always watching. I remembered the message that had appeared on her phone. "We know where you park tonight." It suddenly made horrifying sense. I hired private security. They quit. I changed apartments. They found the new address. I reported suspicious activity. Nothing could be proven. So, she looked away. I started sleeping somewhere different every night. I couldn't speak. My apartment became predictable. My car didn't. You've been living inside that SUV. For almost 6 weeks. I felt sick. Why didn't you tell me? Her eyes filled with tears. Because the moment I involved you, you became a target. I laughed bitterly. I became a target the moment I stopped beside your SUV. I know. She wiped her eyes. I'm sorry. Then she said something that completely broke my heart. I wasn't protecting myself, Junior. I was protecting you. And Nia. The warehouse fell silent again. Every assumption I had made during the past week collapsed. She wasn't hiding because she had done something wrong. She was hiding because she had refused to do something wrong. Millions of dollars, powerful executives, investors, corrupt contracts. None of it had convinced her to risk innocent lives. For the first time since our divorce, I wasn't looking at my ex-wife. I was looking at the same courageous woman who had once stayed awake beside me in a freezing warehouse, believing impossible dreams could become real. I closed the folder. You're not carrying this alone anymore. She immediately shook her head. No, it's too dangerous. I smiled calmly. You've forgotten something. What? I've spent 14 years building intelligent security systems. I know exactly how people hide, and I know exactly how they expose themselves. For the first time that night, hope returned to her face. But neither of us realized that outside the warehouse, parked across the street, someone had just photographed both of us entering the building. The photograph taken outside the warehouse reached the wrong people before sunrise. We didn't know it yet. But someone inside Simone's company now had proof that she wasn't alone anymore. That changed everything. The following morning, I dropped Nia at preschool as if nothing had happened. She hugged me tightly before running toward her classroom. "Daddy," I smiled. "Yes, sweetheart? When Mummy gets better, can we all eat pancakes together again? Children never stop believing broken things can be repaired." I kissed her forehead. "We'll see." As I walked back to my SUV, my phone vibrated. It was Simone. "Junior, they know." My heart sank. "What happened?" "My office. They searched it. They didn't steal anything. They wanted me to know they had been inside." "When?" "Last night. Exactly while we had been meeting. Someone had been sending us a message. We see everything. Stay where you are," I said. "I'm coming." Simone's headquarters overlooked the East River. Glass walls. Modern architecture. Hundreds of employees moving through the lobby as though it were any ordinary Tuesday. Only Simone knew it wasn't. When I entered through the visitor entrance, she met me in a private conference room. She looked exhausted. But there was something different in her eyes. Determination. She placed another folder on the table. "I made a copy." "Of what?" "Everything. Emails. Financial projections. Internal audit reports. Hidden payment approvals. Private conversations. Board voting records." She had spent months quietly documenting every irregularity. Not because she wanted revenge, because she knew one day the truth would need proof. I slowly turned each page. The pattern became impossible to ignore. A small group of executives had created shell companies. Those companies supplied software to hospitals. The software had never completed required safety testing. Millions of dollars flowed through consulting contracts designed to hide the money. Every document pointed toward the same conclusion: corporate fraud. On a terrifying scale. "They expected me to sign," Simone said. "When I refused, they isolated me. They hoped I'd eventually surrender." I looked up. "So why haven't they removed you as CEO?" She gave a tired smile. "Because they need my signature. Without it, the contract couldn't legally move forward." For 8 months, she had quietly stood between corruption and thousands of innocent patients. Alone. I leaned back in my chair. "They underestimated one thing." She looked at me. "What?" "They assumed only healthcare experts could uncover this." I opened my laptop. "They forgot who designs intelligent security systems." Back at Urban Grid, I assembled a team of 3 people I trusted with my life. Not executives, not lawyers, engineers. People who believed evidence mattered more than opinions. Inside our cybersecurity laboratory, we began reconstructing months of digital records, building access logs, server authentication histories, visitor registrations, security camera metadata, deleted network activity. Modern buildings remember everything. Doors remember. Elevators remember. Servers remember. Most people simply don't know how to ask the right questions. 48 hours later, we found it. Someone had entered Simone's executive office at 1:47 a.m. Their employee access card had been disabled months earlier. Yet somehow, the system still opened the door. "That's impossible," one engineer whispered. "No," I shook my head. "It's intentional." Someone inside the company had secretly restored restricted credentials. Not by accident, by design. Then another discovery appeared. Security footage had been deleted. Or at least, someone believed it had. Urban Grid's recovery software reconstructed fragments hidden inside the storage array. The video wasn't complete, but it was enough. 3 executives, 1 outside consultant, boxes of confidential files, a laptop connected directly to Simone's computer. One of the men looked directly toward the camera before disconnecting it. He believed the recording had disappeared forever. He was wrong. I immediately called Simone. "I found them." Silence. Then one question. "Can you prove it?" I looked at the recovered footage. The timestamps, the access records, the copied files. Yes, She didn't speak for several seconds. When she finally answered, her voice trembled. Then tomorrow. Everything changes. The emergency board meeting began at 9 o'clock the next morning. Every director sat around the polished oak table, expecting another routine discussion. None of them knew Simone had invited one additional guest. Me. The room became silent as I carried a single encrypted hard drive toward the conference table. One executive laughed softly. "Mr. Scott, I believe this meeting is confidential." "It is," Simone replied calmly. "Which is exactly why he's here." For the first time in months, the people who had manipulated contracts, threatened their own CEO, and believed they were untouchable, were no longer controlling the room. They were about to face something they had never expected. Evidence that couldn't be erased. The boardroom had never felt so quiet. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Manhattan skyline, but nobody was admiring the view anymore. Every eye was fixed on the encrypted hard drive resting in front of Simone. One director cleared his throat. "What exactly is this about?" Simone didn't answer immediately. She looked at each person around the table. For months, she had walked into this room carrying fear. Today, she walked in carrying the truth. She turned toward me. "Junior." I nodded and connected the drive to the conference room screen. The first image appeared. Building access logs, dates, times, employee credentials. Then came the recovered security footage. The room fell silent. Nobody spoke. 3 executives appeared on the screen entering Simone's office long after midnight. One of them disconnected the security camera. Another copied confidential files. A third removed several folders from a locked cabinet. The timestamp matched the access records perfectly. One board member leaned forward. "Is this authentic?" I calmly replied. The footage was reconstructed using Urban Grid's forensic recovery platform. The access logs were obtained directly from your building automation servers. They cannot be altered without leaving another digital footprint. Another director looked toward the executives sitting at the opposite end of the table. None of them spoke. Their confidence had disappeared. Then Simone opened the second folder. The surveillance. Photographs appeared one after another. Her apartment, her vehicle, restaurants, coffee shops, parking lots. Every image carried dates and locations. They wanted me to believe I was never alone. She paused. They succeeded. One elderly director slowly removed his glasses. "My God." "They were stalking you." Simone nodded. "For 8 months." The chairman stood. "I believe this meeting should end immediately." "No," Simone answered firmly. "It ends today." She placed one final document onto the table. The anonymous payment records. The transfers connected every shell company, every consulting agreement, every fraudulent invoice, every illegal payment. The evidence completed the picture. One executive finally broke the silence. "This isn't what it looks like." Simone looked directly at him. "It looks exactly like what it is." He stood abruptly. "You have no idea how business works." "No," she answered calmly. "I know exactly how integrity works." Security officers entered the room less than 2 minutes later. Not because anyone shouted. Not because anyone fought. Because the chairman had quietly pressed the emergency security button beneath the conference table. One by one, the executives were escorted from the room. None of them looked toward Simone. None of them looked toward me. For the first time in months, they weren't controlling anyone anymore. 2 weeks later, federal investigators officially announced a criminal investigation into the fraudulent contracts. Hospitals immediately suspended the unsafe software rollout. Independent auditors confirmed Simone had refused every illegal approval placed before her. The headlines finally changed. Instead of questioning her leadership, they praised her courage. But the newspaper articles weren't what mattered most. One Saturday morning, Simone came to Prospect Park. No cameras followed her. No reporters waited nearby. She wasn't wearing an expensive business suit, just jeans and a simple sweater. Nia ran across the grass the moment she saw her. "Mummy!" Simone knelt and hugged her tighter than I had ever seen. She closed her eyes as tears quietly rolled down her face. "I'm so sorry," Nia smiled. You don't have to cry. We're together. Children have a way of saying profound things without realizing it. Later, while Nia chased pigeons across the park, Simone and I sat quietly on a wooden bench. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, she broke the silence. I spent years believing that if I worked hard enough, everything else would somehow wait for me. She looked toward our daughter. It didn't. I nodded slowly. I made the same mistake. The company had survived. Her career had survived. But neither success could return the years we had lost as husband and wife. Still, something beautiful had survived. Respect, trust, our friendship, our commitment to Nia. Simone looked at me. Thank you. Not for saving my career, for reminding me who I was before all of this. I smiled. My mother used to tell me something every Sunday before church. She looked at me. What was it? I repeated the words I had carried since childhood. Character is what remains after success and failure both leave the room. For years, I thought she was talking about business. Now I finally understood. She was talking about life. Simone quietly repeated those words to herself. Then she smiled. A real smile. Not the one magazine covers had captured. The one I remembered from the beginning of our story. The smile of a woman who no longer had anything to prove. As we watched Nia laugh beneath the afternoon sun, I realized something else. Forgiveness doesn't always rebuild a marriage. Sometimes, it builds something even stronger. Peace. 6 months have passed since the day I found Simone asleep inside her SUV. Sometimes I still drive through that same Brooklyn street, not because I'm searching for answers anymore, because I never want to forget what that night taught me. The street hasn't changed. The same maple tree still stretches over the sidewalk. The same streetlights still paint long reflections across the pavement after it rains. The same quiet neighborhood still falls asleep long before midnight. But every time I pass that parking space, it reminds me that appearances can be dangerously convincing. The world believed Simone had everything. Power, influence, recognition. A corner office overlooking Manhattan. Magazine covers. Television interviews. Standing ovations at business conferences. No one saw the fear she carried after sunset. No one saw the nights she spent sleeping inside a luxury SUV simply because doing the right thing had made her a target. And no one would have known if one little girl hadn't looked out a car window. Urban Grid building intelligence continued growing, but I changed the way I measured success. For years, I counted contracts, buildings, revenue, expansion. Now I counted different things. Breakfasts with Nia before school, Saturday mornings without checking my phone, walking her to the park, listening to stories that only a 4-year-old could invent. Those moments became my greatest achievements. The board at Urban Grid noticed the change. Meetings became shorter. Family leave became more generous. Weekend emails disappeared. Managers were encouraged to go home before dinner whenever possible. One executive asked me why I had changed so many company policies. I smiled, because healthy companies are built by people who still have a life outside the office. Nobody argued. Productivity actually improved. Sometimes the best business decision has nothing to do with business. Simone also rebuilt her life. She remained CEO, but on very different terms. The corrupt executives were gone. Independent directors joined the board. New compliance systems were introduced. Transparency became more valuable than quarterly profits. Whenever hospitals signed new technology agreements, they knew one thing: patient safety would never again be negotiable. She also made another promise. No board meeting would ever cause her to miss one of Nia's important moments. And she kept that promise. Every school performance, every parent conference, every birthday. She was there. Not as a perfect mother, as a present one. People often ask whether Simone and I ever got married again. The answer is no. Some stories aren't about finding your way back to the same relationship. They're about becoming better people because of what you survived together. We stopped trying to rewrite the past. Instead, we focused on writing a better future for our daughter. Nia never had to choose between her parents. She grew up knowing that love doesn't always disappear after divorce. Sometimes it simply changes its shape. One evening, after her school music recital, the three of us walked back toward the parking lot. A light rain had just ended. Nia suddenly stopped walking. She pointed toward an empty parking space beneath a maple tree. "Daddy." I looked at her. "Isn't this where we found Mummy sleeping?" I quietly nodded. "It is." Nia smiled before taking both our hands. "I'm happy nobody sleeps in cars anymore." Neither Simone nor I spoke. We simply looked at one another. That little parking space had once represented fear, secrets, loneliness. Now it represented something entirely different: courage, truth, healing, and hope. As we walked away together, I remembered the words my mother had repeated throughout my childhood. Character is what remains after success and failure both leave the room. Back then, I thought she was teaching me how to become successful. Now I understand. She was teaching me how to remain human after success arrived. Because companies can be rebuilt, reputations can recover, fortunes can return. But if character disappears, nothing else truly matters. If you're listening to my story today, remember this. Never assume someone's life is as perfect as it looks from the outside. Some of the strongest people you admire may be fighting battles you'll never see. Choose compassion before judgment. Choose integrity before convenience. Choose family before ambition whenever you can. One decision, made with courage instead of fear, can change not only your own life, but the lives of countless others. Thank you for spending this journey with me. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and turn on notifications. Tell me in the comments what you would have done if you were in my shoes.